To close out the year, I'm rewinding and bringing back the most popular and most listened to episodes of 2024. I'll be back with new episodes on Monday, January 6th. But in the meantime, here is today's Best of Rewind episode. This week's theme on the Retirement Quick Tips podcast is designing a retirement spending strategy. Today, I'm talking about one of the most well-known retirement spending strategies, and that is the 4% rule. So the 4% rule came out as kind of just this standard advice for retirees in the 1990s. And this was after research showed that starting at a 4% withdrawal rate from your investment portfolio would have protected most retirees from running out of money in every single 30-year time period, going all the way back to the Great Depression, even before that. So even when economic conditions were at their worst, if you took out 4% and you adjusted that every year for inflation, you didn't run out of money. Now, this assumed too that you had a diversified portfolio, you had a mix of stocks and bonds. In the base case that I see most often, it's 60% stocks, 40% in bonds. So if you have $1 million portfolio, and that's balanced between stocks and bonds, you could basically take out 4% or $40,000 in year one of retirement, then increase that amount for every year for inflation, whatever that inflation number is, and then not worry about running out of money. So it's great because it keeps your purchasing power. It keeps your income protected against inflation. And again, as long as you stuck with 4% and then again, increase that every year for inflation, you could basically throw a dart, no matter what 30-year time period it was, going all the way back to the 1920s, you wouldn't have run out of money. Now, in practice, however, most retirees, they're not accurately tracking or updating their withdrawals every year for inflation. So what you need to decide this at the outset. Okay, whatever my portfolio value is at retirement, I'm going to take 4% out that year. And then I have to track that and see, okay, year one, I took out 4% and that was this dollar amount. And inflation was X in year one. So now I need to increase that in year two for the amount of inflation and so on and so forth. So you can see how you need like a spreadsheet for this. And the actual number of people who follow this rule and increase it every year for inflation is actually quite low. Another drawback of the 4% rule is in recent years, interest rates have been very, very low for a very long period of time now, up until yesterday, basically. No, I'm exaggerating. Like last year, interest rates are now higher. But from about 2008, 2009, all the way up until 2023 and the tail end of 2022, interest rates were pretty low. So it was harder to justify that the 4% rule would work because most people on bond portfolios were earning like 2%. And so it was harder. The math didn't work as well in a low interest rate environment. And in fact, a couple of years ago, Morningstar, who does a bunch of research around this, they updated the recommendation down to 3.3% and said, okay, it's no longer the 4% rule. You're going to run the risk of running out of money. That's too high. If you do 3.3% instead, you're not going to run out of money. And then, of course, this was back in, I want to say 2021 or 2022. It was very recently they made this change to the recommendation. And then, of course, we had inflation. We have higher interest rates. Bond income is reasonable again. So the recommended safe withdrawal rate, they've moved it back up. I think it's like 3.8%. So now it's at 4% again. So again, it's a strategy that stands the test of time. So it's a great method, but the practicality of doing the inflation adjustment is just something that I find that most people aren't going to do. And then life happens, right? So you could take out 4%, but then what happens when your daughter gets married? What happens when you need to buy a new car? So there are some limitations to the rule again for there, and you need some breathing room with emergency savings and things like that. So I'll talk about some other methods that kind of address these issues later on this week. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Ashley Michike, and this is the Retirement Quick Tips podcast.